What is up, everybody? Welcome to a Sunday evening edition of NBA Crunch Time here on RotoGrinders. Happy to be with you as usual with the slightly earlier start time on Sunday. So we've got a 6 p.m. Eastern lock for an interesting 7-game slate tonight. At least a little more excitement in this slate than what we had last night, where there was pretty much no news throughout the day and not a lot of good teams. Not a ton of news today either, but at least maybe a few more angles for us to talk about here as we head up to lock with a couple of extra games and a couple of more interesting matchups and one rematch of last night with the Spurs and the Rockets playing in the Tankathon battle for the second consecutive night. The Spurs are resting some guys tonight, so we can talk about that. But I am Justin Van Zuden, STL Cardinals 84. I've got TJ Zwarich alongside. TJ, how you doing tonight?
Doing very well. Had been basically researching and building lineups all day, and then tonight I'm headed to Creed 3. So I'm excited. We got a nicely like the way these games are timed out, I'm basically going to start my movie right in the gap between games and then come out of it like right before that 10 p.m. Eastern game starts. So timed it pretty perfectly. Excited to play a little DFS tonight, watch the movie. Feel like this is just a wild amount of value that we have today. 3 teams in particular just stand out as like mega smash spots today. So it's going to be difficult to prioritize, but hopefully we can kind of take everybody through it.
Yeah, it's still a little bit of an interesting slate without a ton of like elite spend up names, and but we do have some value tonight. We've got some discussion points. Obviously, the one that we've kind of known all day has been that Ja Morant is going to be suspended for a couple of games for some faux pas on social media. So Morant is out tonight. Dylan Brooks has been suspended for technical foul accumulation. So the Grizzlies are going to be a little bit shorthanded tonight. Markkanen is out for Utah. Sexton's still out for them as well. So those are a couple of key spots that we've known for much of the day. So it's also an interesting, kind of dynamic because Fanduel has been, kind of up to snuff on making sure the pricing is still tight on these guys. If you look at some of the Grizzlies, you're not getting them at too much of a discount over on Fanduel. So speaking of Fanduel, obviously we'll start there. We'll talk about lineup build over on Fanduel tonight. But make sure that if you're in a legal sports betting state, you can sign up for the FanDuel Sportsbook. Take advantage of their awesome new bonus offer. New customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. Terms and conditions apply on that, but you can check that out at the FanDuel Sportsbook. And tougher to make DFS lineups over on FanDuel. And we mentioned this on last night's show. FanDuel has generally been pretty tight with the pricing, and, it's no greater example than with Ja Morant out tonight. Tyus Jones is $6K on FanDuel, and he's 3,200 on DraftKings. So the lineups are maybe going to look a little bit different between the two sites tonight. But we'll start over on FanDuel. We can kind of, since it's just the two of us, both give our thoughts as far as cash and GPP. But go ahead and kick off our FanDuel discussion if you want to kind of go with maybe we start at the guard spots or we start with certain teams. I'll let you drive with that.
I'm going to pick 3 specific teams to start with because I do really think you can get close to, you can plug in some studs and then you can fill out your lineup with just value pieces from this team. And that's these 3 teams. And that's really all you have to do tonight. I'm looking at just kind of like, I'm not playing myself on FanDuel today, but I'm looking at kind of like a dummy lineup I can build in here. This team currently has Damian Lillard, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Desmond Bane, and it still has almost 5K for my last 2 positions here. So we got a lot more FanDuel value than I think we have had in a really long time today, and I think the build is pretty straightforward. And so the first 3 teams I want to talk about, first off, let's go with the news that just broke recently, and it's with Orlando. Orlando just had Wendell Carter Jr. as a scratch here about an hour ago. They're already missing Gary Harris. And so Mo Wagner is popping into the starting lineup here at 4,400 with power forward eligibility. to me, that is just somebody that I'd want to play in 100% of my lineups over there, whether it's tournament, whether it's cash. And then I'm still very interested as well in ancillary pieces here, like Paolo Banchero, maybe a little Franz Wagner, maybe a little Markel Fultz, maybe a little Jalen Suggs in tournaments. But for the most part, it's really just going to be all about Mo Wagner for me. Like that's a lock button type play. And speaking of lock button type plays, I'd have a very tough time not doing that today with Charles Bassey on the Spurs. They're without like half of their team today, and Bassey at 4,700 at the center position should get mid 20s minutes today. And anytime he gets 20 plus, he absolutely smashes. And then this entire team, like still without Tyus Jones, without Trey Jones, without Jeremy Sohan, and so many others. Guys like Keita Bates-Diop, guys like Devontae Graham, Keldon Johnson, all of which are just phenomenal plays. I don't know why I said Keita Bates-Diop first. He's the worst play out of that group. But like I just really like the Spurs today. And then finally, of course, the Memphis Grizzlies, the team that has been priced up on FanDuel today, but there's still a lot of great spots. Desmond Bane, I think, is still a cash game must. Tyus Jones is still probably a cash game must. And then guys like Aldama, Jaren Jackson Jr., I really like today. But on FanDuel, as crazy as it is to say, I think my favorite Grizzly today outside of Desmond Bane is actually going to be John Concha.
Yeah, I mean, the Memphis guys, I think you can mix and match, quite a few of them, even in cash games with Jones, with Bain, with Tillman, with Jackson, and potentially Conchar as well. I don't think I share quite the same optimism with Conchar. I don't know, as far as the ceiling, I still question that, but I think he's certainly fine. He's probably looking at 20. We got him at 28 minutes tonight. I think that's certainly fair. Maybe he gets to 30 plus, if he gets you 0.8 fantasy points per minute or something like that, you're staring at about 24, which will certainly play for a $4,500 price tag. But
my hot take, Conchar is going to have 35 fantasy points today. Maybe that's too much. 31.
Triple OT. TJ's rooting for triple OT to get him to that 30.
He's gonna hit 5 3-pointers. He's gonna have 5 rebounds, like 4 or 5 assists. Gonna have a steal and a block. Gonna be a big Conchar day today. I feel it.
I updated I did the core plays today, so I do those on the weekends. And I've updated that for the Orlando news. So I tagged Wagner, and then Tyus Jones and Bassey. So those are the guys. I updated that right as we went on the air here. I left Tillman tagged as well. I don't necessarily think Tillman is an absolute must, but I certainly think that he's fine. Probably playing Wagner over him at this stage if you're choosing between the two. And if you're playing Bassey at center, I mean, if you play Wagner, Tillman, and Bassey, like there's 3 cheap guys. And then you can spend up, for your guard spot. So the kind of the cash game values, Bassey, Jones, Wagner, Tillman, our projections kind of like Matisse Thybulle today. Are you jumping on that bandwagon? I mean, just another guy that's difficult to just say, yeah, that's my guy.
He's not somebody I'm going out of my way to target, but he is somebody that I really like as a last piece today. Like if I have 5K for a small forward and I land on Thybulle, I'm not mad at it at all, especially on FanDuel, just because obviously that steal block upside that he has. However, having said that, I do, if I'm choosing one, prefer John Conchar over Matisse Thybulle. I will say though, on both sites, but I think especially on FanDuel, Damian Lillard is a guy that I want to get in as many lineups as possible. I'm getting to only about 30% of him on DraftKings, and I say only because I wanted to get more than that, but I think I'd even be pushing the 50% range in tournaments on FanDuel, and he's definitely somebody I'd want to play in cash.
Yeah, so you can mix and match kind of those guys. The other team, I guess we haven't talked a whole lot about again, is Utah. They're a little priced up on FanDuel as well, but I mean, without marketing, somebody's got to score for these guys. Maybe this is kind of where the tournament discussion starts, but How are you handling kind of the, Clarkson, Horton Tucker, Olynyk, Kessler, maybe guys that give you some ceiling tonight?
See, this isn't actually a team that I'm getting to in abundance today. I just kind of feel like they've all been priced up for a lot of people to have absences, and now they're starting to get some of them back with Clarkson. I do think Clarkson is a fine play. He's got a good low floor. I'm not sure how high his ceiling is going to be coming back. First game back from injury. They're still probably going to be giving Chris Dunn some minutes, still giving Taylor Horton Tucker a lot. So I do like Jordan Clarkson, but it's not a love at that 30% ownership. If like ownership aside, I like him. I just don't really love that 30% range. But guys like Chris Dunn and Taylor Horton Tucker, they're priced for him to be out. And so if I'm running 150, maybe you still include them in your pool. But the Horton Tuckers and the Dunns, and they're not somebody I'm looking to get to a lot today. Same with Ochai Agbaji. He's not somebody I really need to get to. Olynyk is probably going to be my favorite one on Fanduel, second favorite on DraftKings. Kessler is going to be my favorite on DraftKings, whereas he's probably my second favorite tournament option on Fanduel.
Yeah, Olynyk is the one guy that I think, doesn't feel like he's been priced up compared to the others. So I think Horton Tucker is interesting. I mean, somebody's got to score, and they also have a good matchup against OKC, but Kessler is 8,000. Tough to get on board with that on FanDuel. Agbaji, low usage guy. Like I'd just try to get up to. I mean, even somebody like Conchar feels a little bit better than Agbaji. So Horton Tucker and Olynyk, I think, are my two favorites. At least if you're talking ceiling in cash games, if you want to put Clarkson in there, that's fine. But maybe not as much OKC exposure here on FanDuel. Given the salary constraints. So we've talked about a lot of these values. And you mentioned, that you can get maybe a little bit more stars and scrubs on FanDuel compared to what we've seen on a lot of slates. So of, SGA, Lillard, Giannis, Porzingis getting some ownership with Kuzma out tonight, who would be the kind of the studs you want to prioritize on FanDuel?
So on this note, that actually is something I wanted to double check, because one of my favorite contrarian plays, I just want to make sure. I noticed we don't have a questionable tag next to Jalen Brunson's name in lineup HQ. I saw earlier in the day he was ruled as questionable for this game. And I just want to make sure that that's not something that has changed. That's not that he, I believe he is still questionable as of 6 hours ago for a foot injury. And so if that is the case and Jalen Brunson ends up sitting, I like getting way overweight on this person regardless. It's Julius Randle for tournaments. I love getting a Julius Randle. I'm mixing in some RJ Barrett, some Emmanuel Quickly too. Maybe not so much on FanDuel where they're priced up, but still Julius Randle's a guy I really like taking shots on today for tournaments, because no Rob Williams for the Celtics. That defense is going to be a lot less potent inside with Al Horford holding it down as opposed to Rob Williams. And so, or Mike Muscala. And so Julius Randle is a guy that I view as, hey, if Brunson plays, he still could be a very good play. He still's got a 60-point ceiling. He's got a low enough floor, and he'll be fine. And then if all of a sudden you get Jalen Brunson out, he's probably arguably the best spend up on the slate in that situation. So Julius Randle, somebody I'm trying to get to a lot of today in tournaments. And then my favorite, kind of objectively, taking ownership out of it, SGA is expected to have his minutes managed the rest of the season per Coach Daniel. So that is going to put SGA like right at the bottom of my list. I don't think I have very much of him anyways, but that makes me want to get to him even less. What do I have right now? I got 11% SGA, so I think I actually want to take that out and make some adjusting. But Damian Lillard is going to be my favorite. Julius Randle and Giannis Antetokounmpo are number 2 for me. If you include Jaren Jackson Jr. as a spend up, he's probably number 3. And then I'm trying to get overweight on some guys like Kawhi Leonard, just because I'm going to have a bunch of Memphis players today. And that's probably the next guy that I'm getting to the most of. About 20% Jason Tatum as well. I'm just getting so many value guys that like I'm getting to basically all of these studs similar amounts, because the value guys I'm getting at like 80-90%.
Yeah, you can get access to some of these high-end guys tonight. I'm with you on Lillard. He's probably my favorite. When Simons has been out, he's just been ridiculous. Offensively, he's $1,000 cheaper than Giannis, and projected, for about 4 or 5 points less. So I like Lillard. Worried about SGA for the reason that you mentioned. Basically, this is OKC in late season mode. They're gonna be a tough team to peg here for the last month and a half of the regular season, just because what do they have to play for in terms of other than trying to improve their draft position. And SGA being out there, he's a guy that helps them try to win games. And when you're not trying to do that, well, then you get your minutes managed, so to speak. So I know that they're still kind of on the periphery of the kind of the play-in race, but I mean, that comment leads me to believe that they're not going for the playoffs. Like some of these teams, like the Lakers and the Thunder and the Blazers, it'll be interesting to see what they do down the stretch, because you've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 teams in the Western Conference that are within 3 games of each other, fighting for 1 playoff spot and 4 play-in spots. But it just doesn't seem like the Thunder are going to go for that. So, I mean, if you're in their position, honestly, do you just go ahead?
Yeah, sorry, that's what you're about to ask. This is like the last year I would do this. I kind of feel like they're, pardon me, they have a Holmgren in the midst. I feel like they're kind of one young piece away from being like a great young core that they want to just like fully build around. And if they go kind of 1 more year of this tank, they still have so many first round picks from other teams coming in the future. I think this is the last year you do that. And the next time it's like, I don't even care if it's the 8th seed. It's time to get in the playoffs and get these guys some playoff reps and experience.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like they've been doing this for ever since the Westbrook Harden duo broke up, and it's been, time goes by so fast. Heck, that's probably been 8 years now. I don't know how long it's been, but
I was gonna say, hasn't that only been like a year and a half?
It probably has. I don't know, 4 years, 6 years, 2 years. None of the answers would surprise me.
Since the pandemic started, all the years blend together.
Time just runs together now. I don't know how long it's been. Somebody in the chat can tell us. When was the last year that Harden and Durant and Westbrook were together? Like that's gotta be like 5 years. I have no idea. Anyway, I digress. OKC, it just doesn't seem like they care to just go for that last play-in spot. But for what it's worth, they are 6-point favorites in this game, and they are projected for 120 points. So with Utah down some guys. We've got the rematch with the Spurs and the Rockets, and the Spurs are tanking. The Rockets are tanking, and the Spurs are resting. They got some guys coming back tonight. Keldon Johnson's coming back tonight, but they're resting Collins. They're resting Sohan. They're got a couple other guys out. So if you're just joining us, we did mention that Bassey, becomes a key kind of component on really on both sides tonight, but that's the reason he's going to pop as a value. So, all right, let's see. We've got some questions in the Discord. Our friend Carolina guy, always hanging out with us on the weekends, asks for our favorite FanDuel single entry play and favorite spend up. So who's your favorite spend up on FanDuel single entry builds tonight?
Damian Lillard.
I would agree with Lillard. I think that's the play as well, and his ownership a little bit lower than I expected, with it being under 20%. So on a 7-game slate, I think he is fine as well. Any other thoughts here on FanDuel before we pivot over to talk about DraftKings?
Not specifically. The biggest thing is just like we've been preaching all year long. FanDuel has been so good at pricing guys up quickly. The Stars and Scrubs build is just so difficult to get to. We see ourselves so often just wanting to go to the mid-range, and it's the better play because, like you said, Tyus Jones is 6K. Tyus Jones isn't 3K like he is on DraftKings. There are some cases today where that's not the case. Guys like Charles Bassey, guys like Mo Wagner, because it happened today, they didn't have the chance to price them up on FanDuel, even though they're only projected for like 6, 7x, which isn't like the 10x type projections you will see on DraftKings. I still think because that Wagner and Bassi news came out today, those are just like literal lock button plays for me today because no other value compares on FanDuel. And then that would allow me to get to a lot more Damian Lillard, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Julius Randle, Jason Tatum, guys like that.
Yeah, it does come a little bit different on FanDuel than what we're used to with the news that just broke today. And now as we kind of pivot over to DraftKings, it is, it's definitely softer over there because let's take the guys that we talked about on FanDuel. Tyus Jones is $6K. He's $3,100 on DraftKings. Bassi is $3,900 on DraftKings. Mo Wagner is $3,400 on DraftKings. Bain at 7,600 is a little more gettable on DraftKings. Devontae Graham is 4,600, and Jones is out for San Antonio tonight. And oh, by the way, Cole Anthony is only 4,300 on DraftKings, and it's just basically the Stars and Scrubs build is very obvious on DK tonight because if you start with the 4 most popular values, that would be Jones, Bassi, Cole Anthony, and Wagner. You have $8,825 for your remaining 4 spots on average. So, I mean, DraftKings seems to come together pretty easily tonight, at least for cash games.
Yeah, and it's like the biggest thing today is just like, how do we prioritize the value? Because there's so much of it. Plays that would normally be lock button plays for me, they're not not because I think they're going to fail. It's just because I don't know if they're going to be the highest scoring play at their position. And so somebody like Charles Bassi, this would typically be a lock button scenario for me. But today, like I have 85% of them. Jones, I got 85% of. Wagner, I got 75% of. And that's because, well, like, what if Bol Bol outscores Mo Wagner? What if I don't know who's going to score more between Cole Anthony and Devontae Graham? Like, that's a toss-up. If that's the most toss-up type thing I've ever seen. Somebody like Kelly Oubre today going up against Keldon Johnson at that almost the exact same price. These are just 2 almost equally good plays to me today. And so because of that, I'm trying to keep my pool pretty tight and just get all of the different combinations of these players I love in an MME scenario. But I agree with you for cash. Like, you have to play both Bassi and Wagner. Bassi and Wagner. You're choosing 2 of the 3 of Jones. Sorry, I think you put in Jones and Lillard. Like, I think those 2 are going to be musts. But I understand if you don't want to play Lillard because you want to play Cole Anthony, Devontae Graham, and Tyus Jones. But if you do that, if you play Devontae Graham, Tyus Jones, and Cole Anthony, then that also means you can't play Desmond Bain. And so you are choosing 5 of these 5 players: Tyus Jones, Desmond Bain, Cole Anthony, Devontae Graham, and Damian Lillard. I think you are choosing 3 of them for the point guard, shooting guard, and the guard position. That's necessary. You have to choose 3 of those 5 players, and then you have to play Bassi and Wagner and your setter and utility positions.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of duplication on FanDuel tonight, a lot of 2v2s. There really are only a handful of options that feel optimal at all the positions. And, you can very easily come up on this versus that. And I only have, 2 spots that I'm kind of questioning for my DraftKings build tonight. So I think we'll see for those that have questions. It's going to be a lot of 2v2 questions. And I would expect that it's probably going to be a fairly high scoring night. And then you're going to be able to get some spend ups on DraftKings as well. And what's ironic is if you compare the ownership, everybody's almost incrementally higher on DK. Giannis, 22% ownership. Lillard, 20% ownership. Tatum, 20% ownership. SGA, 23. You got these guys, Randall and Leonard, just barely in the double digits, but they're in the single digits on FanDuel. So you do have access with Jones being so cheap and Wagner being so cheap and Bassi being so cheap to maybe get an extra stud on FanDuel. So Steve-O in the Discord says Tatum was held to 14 points and ejected the last time out against the Knicks, so he wants in. That's not, the motivational angle for sure, because the Knicks beat him last time and Tatum, got tossed. So maybe he goes nuts tonight, but definitely an interesting upside play there. Otherwise, the stars are the same guys. I mean, I presume you prefer Lillard on DraftKings for your spend up as well, but maybe talk about some of your favorite spends on DK.
Yeah, they're a lot of the same. And so Lillard is a 40% guy for me, Randall, and like that's kind of how I'm tiering them almost as like 40%, 30%, 20%, 10%. And so Lillard is my only stud at 40% today. Julius Randle, and for the reasons I mentioned on FanDuel, he's a fine, very solid play if Jalen Brunson plays. And if Jalen Brunson, who's questionable, happens to sit today, then he's one of the very best spend-ups on the slate. So Julius Randle and Giannis Antetokounmpo are the two guys I'm getting in the 30% range of. Jason Tatum and Kawhi Leonard are the two in the 20% range. And then Porzingis, Jaylen Brown, Paul George, Bradley Beal, all those guys are hanging out in the 10% range today.
Yeah, I don't mind that one bit for my kind of top-end exposure on DraftKings as well. Maybe if we got some time, so we've got 14 minutes left. If you got questions, throw them into YouTube, throw them into our RotoGrinders Discord. If you're a premium subscriber, we will prioritize the questions in the Discord NBA Crunch Time channel. And we've got one from the beginning of the show from C. Goddard. What is your favorite game stack for a tournament on DraftKings? So if you're looking to maybe run back, exposure from two different teams tonight, which one is your favorite out of this group of 7 we got tonight?
Probably on DraftKings, it's probably Portland and Orlando. You go Dame Lillard and maybe a second one, somebody like Cam Reddish or Matisse Thybulle or even Jeremy Grant, and then run it back on the other side with Wagner, with Paolo Banchero, and Cole Anthony. 3 players from the Orlando side, something like that. So that's probably my favorite. I'm not doing I'm not doing a ton of full stacks. I'm getting a lot of 3-1 type scenarios though, where a team like Orlando, who I'm heavy on, I'll play 3 Orlando players, run it back with Lillard. I'm heavy on San Antonio, so I'll play Graham, Bassey, Keldon Johnson, run it back with KJ Martin or Tari Eason, 2 guys who aren't very expensive. I don't really feel the need to go to Jalen Green or Alperen Sengun because I want the center position and point guard and shooting guard position for other more valuable players today. And then the final one would be Memphis and the Clippers doing something like playing Desmond Bain, Tyus Jones, Xavier Tillman, or Jaren Jackson Jr., John Conchar, and run it back with a guy like Kawhi Leonard.
Yeah,
the sneakiest one would be New York and Boston. Play it like Jalen Brunson's going to be out. You play Julius Randle, Emmanuel Quickly at 4,700, and maybe even RJ Barrett if you wanted at 53, and then you run it back with Tatum on the other side. I think that would be a very sneaky way of going about it too.
Yeah, definitely a contrarian build there in GPPs. I like the thought of maybe some of the Clippers running back with Memphis if you're looking for the late night hammer there. But that Portland Orlando one definitely will be a little more popular on DraftKings because Wagner is so cheap and because Cole Anthony is so cheap. Pretty significant price difference in Cole Anthony on DraftKings here as well. And Jeremy Grant is fairly gettable on DK. So that Portland Orlando one definitely has some appeal on DraftKings. All right, Jay Epst says Eason and Bain or Jaren Jackson Jr. and Graham in a DK tournament.
Eason and Bain or Jaren Jackson Jr. and who, sorry?
And Graham.
I'd go JJJ and Graham.
All right, producer Devin with a question. If SGA is on a minutes limit, does that increase your interest in some of those other OKC pieces like Giddey or somebody like that?
No, because maybe Giddey, but still no, because they're going to be they're all priced up for him to be not playing at all.
Yeah, it's a little bit weird because you'd think you'd want some exposure there with their team total being so high, but this is just a team that at this time of year is just so difficult to peg. And Jalen Williams, the more expensive Jalen Williams is. How do you delineate these? Jalen with an I and Jalen with an E?
Jalen with an I. Yeah.
All right, Jalen with an E is 7K on DraftKings. Jalen with an I, maybe a little more gettable on DK, but Giddey's 8,100. Dort is 5,900. And as long as SGA is active, it's just a tough team to peg, which is why you see a whole lot of negative RG values and red in the grid if you search by OKC, even though they have what I believe, is the highest implied team total on the slate. A little bit weird to see that given their total. All right, NBA DFS says FanDuel cash, Giannis and Beal or Jaylen Brown and Lillard.
Brown and Lillard, I would go with. I want to make this is somebody I'm not fully fading, but I'm about half of what the field has of this guy today. And I think he makes for a strong underweight tournament play. And that's Kelly Oubre Jr. Kelly Oubre, they get PJ Washington back today, which shouldn't limit him that much, but it should limit him a little bit. He's still a fine play. It's just not at his ownership. I think I'm going to want to get underweight on it today because of the addition of PJ Washington, but also because of who he's just going to be directly matched up against all the time. It's going to be Bridges. It's going to be Finney Smith. This entire defense as a whole isn't that good, but they do have a couple really strong on-ball guys. And so I that's kind of one of my underweight approaches is Kelly Oubre today.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised how much he was popping in the projections in the earlier part of the day. All right, F. Reyes says DK Cash. This is 2v2v2, so pick your favorite of the three. Giannis and Thibault is 1. Tatum and Kelly O is 2, and Randall and Keldon Johnson is 3.
I would go Randall and Keldon Johnson.
All right, Anthony or Graham if choosing one on a DraftKings tournament.
If I have Damian Lillard, Anthony. If I don't, Graham. No, that's not because it could, even if it's a blowout, that could work. It's literally a toss-up. I think I would probably be going if I had Lillard. Maybe I would do Anthony, and if not, I would go Graham. But I have 32% Devontae Graham, 27% Cole Anthony. So it's tough.
I think I'd take Anthony by a nose, but not a strong take. All right, FanDuel single entry quickly or DeLon Wright from Carolina Guy.
What time do those games happen at? So Washington is at 7:30, and they're both at 7:30. So it's quickly if Brunson's out, and it's DeLon Wright if Brunson's in.
All right, should be able to get that info before both of those games lock. All right, Jay Sams has a theory question. We spoke about FanDuel pricing guys efficiently this year compared to other years. With that being said, does our strategy need to change since we are so used to soft pricing on FanDuel over the years? Everyone's dealing with the same kind of salary change, but how does that change in general how we're building lineups on FanDuel compared to, maybe before when the pricing was a little bit loose?
So for most of the slates and for what's usually been the case in NBA, and it's still the case in DraftKings, is the stars and scrubs approach is almost always optimal. That hasn't been the case at all on FanDuel this year. The stars and scrubs approach has not been optimal. It's been the balanced builds just because of how quickly everybody's getting priced up. Today, there are exceptions like today where news breaks the day of and somebody who wasn't reported as questionable the day before gets ruled out the next day on a back-to-back or what have you. And so that's why we have situations today like Mo Wagner and Charles Bassey, who are such good values that I think you can go back to a more stars and scrubsy approach for FanDuel. But throughout this season, yes, it would have been better to have a mid-range approach. That's important to kind of go that way unless you get the day of news.
All right, so I think that takes care of most of the questions in the Discord. I do see one person typing, so get your question in there. We'll grab that, and then we can take a little bit of questions in the YouTube chat. So let me get that open here as well. We've got about 5 minutes left until lock. So again, remember earlier lock time on Sundays. All right. Jay Epst says DK, GPP, Giannis and Eason, or Porzingis and Jaren Jackson Jr.
I think Porzingis and Jaren Jackson Jr. That's just two. I think they both have 50-point ceilings today. And even though I really like the Giannis and Eason combo, I think I would probably just rather go JJJ and Porzingis.
Yeah, I think it gives you a little more ceiling. All right, so going over to the YouTube chat. All right, Michael Dixon says, how do you feel about Bradley Beal? Not somebody we talked about a whole lot. What do you think about Beal tonight?
Don't mind Bradley Beal today. Not somebody I'm getting to in bunches, but with Monte Morris out, with Kyle Kuzma, I think he's a very strong play today. It's just there's so many other strong plays too.
Yeah, Derek says that Oubre is currently hitting the DK optimal lineup. I don't know. I'm
pivoting to Keldon Johnson instead, personally. That's what I'm doing. Is I'm going Keldon Johnson instead of Beal. Instead of Oubre.
Yeah, I would probably do the same, especially with all those guys out for the Spurs tonight. All right. Let's see. Darren Unger had asked earlier, Fanduel, Agbaji, Tatum, or Beal and Keldon Johnson. Hot
Beal
take there.
Keldon.
Yeah, I think Agbaji just doesn't do much for me either. Andrew Coleman says KJ Martin or Jabari for cash on DraftKings.
Don't love either for cash, but I would go with KJ Martin instead.
Yeah, it's always tough to pick between those guys. Scott Davies, FanDuel GPP, Giannis and Eric Gordon. In the mentions.
Randall and Keldon. Definitely Randall and Keldon.
Definitely Randall and Keldon. See,
not Giannis and Eric Gordon.
Cam Johnson or Franz Wagner?
Cam. Love me some Cam Johnson.
Yeah, I kind of like Cam Johnson too. He's come down the wish list throughout the day because of the other news that's broken, and his ownership isn't going to be nearly as high as it would have been, like 5 hours ago. Like, let me see what we have him at. Oh, see, I got to scroll. Cameron Johnson, we've got at 13% on DraftKings now. I'm pretty sure he was double that when I first looked this morning. We got him at 22 on FanDuel. All right, Giannis and Clarkson or Paul George and Kawhi Leonard?
I would go Giannis and Clarkson for that one, but I will say it would be somewhat interesting for tournaments. Say if you got Bane and JJJ and Tyus Jones and maybe even another Memphis player already in your lineup just to run it back with the PG and Kawhi, but I typically wouldn't like playing those two together. So that's Giannis and Clarkson by a mile for me.
All right, back to the Discord. Steve-O says DK, GPP, Reddish, or Graham?
Graham.
Definitely Graham and GPPs. I think Reddish is just fine for cash games tonight, but talk about a guy who won't give you too much of a ceiling. He is certainly that guy. So, all right, we're at about a minute left here until lock. I'm going to refresh the news page. Not a whole lot of news, just a lot of it that is for tomorrow already. So, Detroit going to be a mess again tomorrow, but we'll deal with that then. Wiseman questionable, Stewart out, Hayes questionable, Jalen Duren out. So tomorrow Detroit is going to be a fun one for us to talk about, but no additional news that has come across for today's slate. So that's good news. No last minute adjustments and not a whole lot expected in terms of the later games. Brunson would be the big one to keep an eye on. And Denny Abdi, I believe, is questionable as well with the illness. So those are the two guys in those 7:30 games that maybe it you maneuver your lineup a little bit depending on what happens with Avdia and Brunson, but nothing
and
else.
Let's hit that like button on our way out as well, because we had almost 200 people watching here today. Let's get it up to 50 before we get out of here.
Yeah, smash that thumbs up button, please. We appreciate that very much. And thanks to you smashing the thumbs up button and to Fanduel, we can keep this show free for you all year long. And it's going to be, super valuable heading up to lock with all the, kind of the tanking and the late season, kind of shenanigans that go on. We're going to see a lot more of it as we hit the back half of March with teams resting players. And as teams get playoff spots locked up, resting players, tanking teams resting players, and it just becomes a bit of a mess. So, and with that, we are at lock. Appreciate all of you hanging out with us. TJ, anything else for the people before we call it a Sunday night here?
That's it. Good luck tonight. Hope everybody had a great weekend, and we'll see you throughout the week.
All right. Good luck, everybody. Appreciate you checking us out. As always, we'll be back tomorrow with our usual content for the start of the work week. And don't forget also, Noto and I, we do the golf show on Monday evenings, and it's Players Championship week next week. So there's going to be big golf tournaments out there next week. So check that out.
PGA tournament I've ever attended live is the Players Championship.
Definitely a fun tournament, fun course. Definitely on the list for me to try to get to someday. Never jives well with tax time, so it's with it where it is on the calendar, but on the retirement bucket list for sure. To get down to Florida and see the players. But for now, we'll have you covered from the DFS angle tomorrow night after NBA locks. So be sure to check that out. Would like to thank Devin for producing behind the scenes for us tonight as well, working hard on the weekend. So for TJ, I'm Justin. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday evening, everybody. Good luck with all your lineups, and we'll be back at you tomorrow. Have a good one.